Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at the new Synology DS723 Plus. On the surface, this looks like a lot of the other 2-drive Plus models we've looked at in the past, but there's a lot of new features on this one that I think might be attractive to many of you. And unfortunately, one feature that doesn't work so great, but we're going to dive into this and see what this drive is all about in just a second. But I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, that this came in free of charge from Synology. However, they are not paying for this review, nor are they reviewing or approving what you're about to see before it was uploaded, and all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. I will mention, though, that Synology is an occasional sponsor here on the channel, and we've produced sponsored tutorials for them in the past, but again, there's no interaction on the review of this unit that you're about to see. So with that out of the way, let's get into it and see what this new drive is all about. Now, the price point on this comes in at $449. This is known as a network attached storage device, or a NAS, and it comes without any drives installed, so you do need to bring your own. The drives that they sent me to review with this unit are Seagate IronWolf drives, which are designed for network attached storage usage. Another brand that I have used are WD Red drives, and those also work pretty well, although the Seagate drives do get a little bit more analytics available to you inside of the Synology control panel. This unit has a Ryzen processor, an AMD chip, not an Intel, an R1600, which is a dual-core processor, and that's going to provide some issues with our Plex experiment in a little bit, unfortunately. But for a lot of other tasks, I found it to be quite adequate for the hardware here. Now, this is the 2-drive unit, but they also have a 4-bay version available as well, called the 923 Plus. And there's also a 1522 Plus that has the same processor and 5-drive bays. The 2-bay unit is fine for personal use and home office use, but having 4 or 5 drives does give you some more flexibility. But you'll see there are some other things you can add to this for storage beyond just the 2 hard drives. Inside are 2 SATA slots for those hard drives like we've seen before. These NAS drives are standard SATA spinning drives, but this will also work with SATA SSDs if you wanted to get something a little zippier instead of the spinning drives, although of course those SSDs cost more than a spinning drive might cost you. Now, by default, this is going to be configured in a mirrored format where one drive mirrors to the other. So we have 2 4-terabyte drives here, and we'll have 4 terabytes of storage because one drive is going to mirror to the other. Now, for memory, this unit ships with 2 gigabytes of RAM. And as you can see, there's only 1 RAM slot occupied right now. There's a second slot unoccupied. And so you can actually upgrade this to 32 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty substantial for a small unit like this. Keep in mind, though, that these require ECC memory, and Synology wants you to buy their RAM and not other companies' RAM for this device. If you use third-party RAM on this, you may lose support and warranty support from the company because they have found apparently that some RAM modules work better than others in here, and they have more control over their RAM. Don't shoot the messenger here, that's just what they require. Now, in addition to the usual hard drive slots on this, on the back, of course, we've got our cooling fan. I found this to be pretty quiet in operation. We have 2 1 gig Ethernet ports back here like we've seen before. You can run these in what's called link aggregation mode, or you can have them connected individually to different networks if you want. And a lot of people use these for security surveillance systems, so you could have one network for your security cameras and another for your data on the network. You also have an eSATA slot here for plugging in external hard drives over an eSATA cable. Additionally, as you see in mine, there is an optional 10 gig Ethernet adapter plugged into its expansion port, and 10 gig has been a big ask for folks on these lower level drive units, and now you have that option. This does, though, cost $150 to add on, but if you're looking for more performance, as you'll see in a few minutes, this will certainly deliver a much better experience if you are looking to transfer large amounts of data, and we'll be looking at the performance of that in a second. This does screw in, but I have the screws out just so I could demo how that goes in. You have a Kensington lock slot here, and then you've got your power supply that plugs in there. Synology says this uses about 21 watts total under load and about 8 watts when it's sitting idle. Now on the bottom, there's some more things to look at here, because this drive now has NVMe storage slots too. So let's open these up and see what we have inside. Now I've got two Synology NVMe SSDs plugged in. And this is another area where I'm going to ask you not to shoot the messenger, but if you use Synology NVMe drives, you can use these as another storage volume. So you could store data on here just like you store it on the other drives. And as you'll see in a few minutes, it is very, very fast. But in order to use that feature where these are going to be used as a storage volume, you have to buy the Synology NVMe's. These cost more than your standard NVMe, so their 400 gigabyte model at the time I'm recording this video is $150 each. So we've got $300 worth of NVMe's installed on here. And of course, you can certainly get other NVMe's with more storage for less money, but Synology is not going to let you use those as a storage volume. The reason why Synology wants you to use their NVMe's versus others is that they have more control over the thermals. And they said that they have found other NVMe's just get too hot in here and they were not able to effectively manage the heat. They can effectively control it on their own drives, and that's why they require that. Now, you can use third-party NVMe's for what they call cache storage. And what that lets you do is have the system here figure out what files you use most frequently, and it can put those files on the NVMe drives that allow you to access that data quicker. But to be able to actually store what you want on those drives and use it like a regular drive, you're going to need the Synology modules to do that. Now, if you have a drive failure, you can hot swap the drives while the unit is on. You basically just pull out the dead drive, replace it, and then stick it back in. And as long as your first drive is functional, the second drive will get rebuilt and all will continue without issue. And I've had to do that once or twice over the years here, and I've always found it to be pretty seamless. But you do, of course, want to make sure that you keep consistent backups of the data that's on your Synology drive, because even though you've got mirrored drives, this is not a backup. And you can back this up to the cloud. You can also back it up to external hard drives. This device has, of course, that eSATA slot in the back, and you can also connect a USB drive here to the front. And you can also use this USB port for offloading files from external drives as well. Now, as far as the NVMe's are concerned, you cannot take these out while the unit is on. So make sure you switch it off before you swap them out. But they do come out very easily here. You just hit this little thing there and you're good to go. So they pop in and out very easily, but just make sure the unit is off before you try to change anything out. All right, let's see what we can get this thing to do now. I've got it connected to my 10 gig network using the optional adapter. Additionally, I've got my MacBook Air here, also on that 10 gig network, connected over a 10 gig Thunderbolt Ethernet adapter that I have back there. And what I wanted to do was just show you the web-based control panel for the Synology NAS. If you've never seen this before, it is really nice to use. And it almost looks like its own little mini operating system that you can access with a web browser. And as you'll see here, we actually have all three of the network connections available to us. So you could map things differently based on what software you're running on the NAS. These do support Docker containers, so you could have a lot of fun routing things out to different VLANs or whatever, because you do have three distinct connections that you can make here. Additionally, because this is a Plus Series NAS, you get access to most of the apps that Synology offers on the enterprise level. So that includes things like their snapshot replication, which allows you to make internal replications, kind of mini backups of the file system, but also send those backups to another Synology NAS over the internet or on your local network. You get access to their active backup utility, which actually will go out and back up fully all the PCs on your network in a very efficient way. We covered that in a prior video. You can even do things like run your own Dropbox or install a Google-like experience for word processing, spreadsheets, and presentations. They basically have a full-on Office suite that you get as part of the deal here, and you can host all of that on your own drive that you have direct control over for no additional cost. So if you have a lot of files that you are trying to share with people within your organization and you have a good amount of upstream bandwidth, you can get rid of a lot of the cloud services and just run it all off of this, and also have it work as your backup destination and a whole bunch of other things. Again, we've covered all this in the past, but it's good to know that the Plus series drives here do a lot more than their lower cost ones do, and you'll have access to all of that within the Synology Package Center here, along with things that you can install on your own, either through custom packages or through Docker. And one other note, if you put some more memory in this, it actually has a virtual machine feature where you could boot up Windows and Linux and other operating systems and have them run virtually on the hardware. There are some limits to this given the processor power here, but you can do some pretty cool stuff with one of these Synology NASs, and they're very much a computer that also happens to be a file server. Speaking of file serving, let's see what this thing can do from a performance perspective now that I've got some data loaded up on it and we're connected to our 10 gig network. So on the NVMe storage volume on the NAS here, I stored a 90 gigabyte Final Cut Pro project that I shot in Las Vegas on our recent trip to CES. And as you can see here, as I scrub through the project, video is playing back just fine. Even though this is a 4K ProRes 422 file, we're able to sustain the bandwidth here for doing some light video editing, which I thought was pretty cool. You will see a couple of things that may not be as quick as they might be on a Thunderbolt drive directly connected to your computer, but if you're doing a lot of pretty simple edits like I do, this is something that I think will certainly help your workflow out quite a bit, because you could have two people working on a project, and rather than tossing external drives around the office, you can very quickly go in, make some edits, and have somebody else grab that library file off the NAS and continue working here. So all in, from a throughput standpoint, at least insofar as a real-world application is concerned, this seems to work out really well here so far, and it feels a lot like my external drives do. Now, if you're curious as to what the potential maximum throughput is on one of these devices, check it out. We are right now writing data to my NVMe storage volume on the NAS here, and this is set up in a mirrored configuration where one of those NVMEs is mirroring to the other. But as you can see here, we're getting writes at about 715 megabytes per second and reads at roughly that same rate of performance, which is really good. What I have noticed is that when the drives start to heat up, that write performance will tail off a bit, so you'll lose about 100 megabytes per second. But still, you can get a feel for what kinds of throughput you can get on a device typically from Synology that did far less than what you're seeing here. So a very huge performance bump here when you have those NVMEs installed and configured as volumes. A little bit earlier, I also set up those same NVMEs in a RAID 0 configuration, and this aggregates both their performance and storage capacity. And here, as you can see, in that mode, we were getting about 820 megabytes or so of writes and over a gigabyte per second on the reads. So you could really get a lot of performance squeezed out of this if you were looking to do some things like video editing on your network without having to shuttle external drives around. And it looks like the CPU is able to keep up with everything. So right now we're still running that test. And as you can see here, the CPU utilization is around 25%. It kind of jumps up and down, but I don't see it usually going higher than that. And you can see the chart here over time. And again, we're running this Blackmagic disk speed test back and forth to that NVMe volume that's set up as a mirror. So there is still plenty of room here for other users to do other things on the NAS while we're hitting it pretty hard here with a performance benchmark. So all in, very impressive performance here. Now, if you were to plug this into a 2.5 gigabit network using that 10 gig card, it will negotiate down to that speed. So there is an argument perhaps for buying that card for getting more performance out of the NAS than you would just on one of the gigabit ports. Let's take a look now and see how the spinning drives perform. All right, so I just started the same test, but this time we're running it to the spinning drives that are plugged into the SATA connectors. And as you can see, and as expected, we're not getting the same level of performance that we got out of the NVMEs, but we're still almost double what you typically get out of a Synology NAS on a gigabit network. So you are able to squeeze a little more performance out of your spinning drives, but I think you'll get a lot more out of the NVMe solid states. We could probably squeeze a little bit more out of this if we were using SATA-based SSDs, but still you will see much better performance out of the NVMe's over the 10 gig network than you will with the spinning hard drives. Now, a very popular thing for people with Synology devices to do is have them run as Plex servers. And Plex is a personal media application that allows you to take all the media that you have under your control, like TV shows, movies, and music, and store them on the NAS, but get access to that media anywhere in the world. So I can play back movies like I'm doing now in my home on my home network, but if I leave the house, I can take my phone out and continue watching. And one of the things that Plex does exceptionally well with the right hardware is take large video files like the one I'm playing and crunch them down in real time so that you can watch a movie on a cellular connection that may not have the bandwidth that your local network might. And to show you how this works, right now I am playing a movie off the NAS to my phone here on my local network. But because I've got a lot of bandwidth, I'm able to play this Blu-ray file on my phone directly, as you can see here. So the video is not being transcoded and squished down to a lower bit rate. We're going at the full bit rate. We're not touching the video file, basically just serving that video to the phone directly. The Plex server, though, is doing a little bit of audio transcoding here because my phone doesn't support the audio format that the movie was encoded in, but it's able to do that here without a lot of CPU overhead. So you can see that as this movie has been playing back, we've been utilizing maybe about 5% max of the system here to do the audio transcoding, and the video serving locally is pretty much a trivial exercise because we're not doing any processing to it. But if I go on my phone here, and as I'm talking, I'm going to go and select a smaller bit rate. So I'm going to go down to a 720p at 4 megabits per second. And as you're going to see here, things are going to change dramatically from the CPU utilization standpoint. Now, on most of the Synology Plus series devices, like other ones in this line, you will see that CPU usage jump to maybe 20%, like around here. But as you can see, this one is running at 100%, basically using all of what our CPU has to offer. And that's because these Ryzen processors don't support hardware transcoding. It has to do it on the CPU itself. So the Intel chips that typically power these Plus series devices have a function called Quick Sync Video that allows Plex to do this transcoding without a lot of overhead. But because this CPU lacks that functionality, as you can see here, we are using a lot of resources here to deliver that movie to my phone. So although it is playing back here okay, it will drop out as other people make use of resources on the NAS. This will certainly impact some of the performance that you saw earlier. And if you have more than one person watching something, you're probably going to have everything not crash, but break up and be buffering all the time because it just can't keep up with the load. If this was hardware transcoding, we would see that indicated here. So it's safe to say that, unfortunately, the Ryzen processor on this NAS does not do Plex hardware transcoding, and that might be a deal breaker for some of you that were looking at this as an upgrade for your existing Plus device that runs as a Plex server. Now, if you're not utilizing any transcoding, it will serve media fine within the home. It's just that when the transcoder kicks on, where the performance issues will certainly show themselves. But overall, I found this to be an excellent upgrade over the prior 2-Drive Plus series models we've seen over the years. They've added a lot of features that people have been asking for, namely some faster storage capabilities and, of course, the ability to use a 10 gig network. And I know a lot of folks were always getting frustrated just to see 1 gig Ethernet on the back. Now you've got a legit 10 gig option here that really delivers a lot of the performance you would expect out of a 10 gig storage device. So all in, a great device here, a great upgrade, but I think it would have probably done a little better for Plex users if they had gone with an Intel chip versus the AMD. That's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Brian Parker, Chris Allegretta, Hot Sauce and Video Games, Logic KGR, Tom Albrecht, and Amda Brown. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to lon.tv/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit lon.tv/s.